This is absolutely sickening and I cannot contain my fury right now. Triple H has just fired Bronson Reed from WWE after he launched the most brutal and disgusting attack on Paul Heyman that I've ever witnessed in 30 years of watching professional wrestling. But here's what's got me seeing absolute red. This wasn't some heat of the moment altercation or storyline gone wrong. This was a calculated, vicious assault on a 60-year-old man that left Paul Heyman hospitalized with injuries so severe that doctors initially weren't sure he would survive. The security footage of this attack is so disturbing that WWE executives who watched it were physically sick. The assault happened during what was supposed to be a routine backstage interview segment when Bronson Reed completely lost his mind and began pummeling Paul Heyman with closed fists, steel objects, and whatever else he could get his hands on. Witnesses describe 6 full minutes of systematic brutality that seemed designed to inflict maximum damage on one of wrestling's most respected figures. The fact that Paul Heyman is old enough to be Bronson's father makes this attack even more disgusting and cowardly. What makes this situation absolutely infuriating is that multiple WWE personnel tried to intervene and stop the assault, but Bronson Reed was like a man possessed, throwing off anyone who attempted to help Paul Heyman. Security guards, fellow wrestlers, and even medical personnel were shoved away as Reed continued his relentless attack on a defenseless man who never stood a chance against someone of his size and strength. This wasn't wrestling. This was attempted murder. The medical report from Paul Heyman's hospitalization reads like something from a horror movie and shows just how close Bronson Reed came to killing one of wrestling's most beloved figures. Multiple skull fractures, internal bleeding, broken ribs, and injuries to his spine that required emergency surgery to prevent paralysis. The doctors who treated Paul described his condition as the worst assault-related injuries we've seen in decades of emergency medicine. But here's what's making wrestling fans around the world absolutely livid. Bronson Reed has shown zero remorse for his actions and has actually been bragging about the attack on social media. His posts after the incident celebrate the violence he inflicted on Paul Heyman and suggest that he would do it again given the chance. The complete lack of humanity and decency displayed by this monster is beyond comprehension. The investigation into what triggered this assault has revealed disturbing details about Bronson Reed's mental state and behavior in the weeks leading up to the attack. Multiple WWE employees report that he had been making increasingly violent threats against Paul Heyman, expressing jealousy over Paul's influence in the company and his relationship with top stars. Reed had apparently become obsessed with the idea that Paul was holding back his career. Security footage from the moments before the attack shows Bronson Reed waiting in ambush for Paul Heyman like a predator stalking his prey. He had positioned himself in a blind spot where cameras couldn't capture his approach and struck when Paul was completely alone and vulnerable. The premeditation involved in this assault makes it even more heinous and criminal. The reaction from the wrestling community has been swift and unanimous in condemning Bronson Reed's actions. Roman Reigns, who has worked closely with Paul Heyman for years, released a statement calling Reed a dangerous individual who has no place in professional wrestling. CM Punk went even further, demanding that criminal charges be filed immediately. The universal disgust from Reed's former colleagues shows how seriously this incident is being taken. What's particularly revolting is how Bronson Reed's attack specifically targeted Paul Heyman's head and vital organs in what appeared to be an attempt to cause permanent damage or death. Medical experts who reviewed the security footage described the assault as systematically brutal, with Reed using techniques that seemed designed to maximize harm. This wasn't just aggression. This was attempted homicide caught on camera. WWE's decision to fire Bronson Reed came after an emergency meeting where executives watched the full security footage and were reportedly horrified by what they witnessed. Sources describe grown men leaving the room in tears after seeing the extent of Reed's brutality against Paul Heyman. The termination was immediate and absolute, with Reed being escorted from the building by police. The financial implications for WWE are staggering as the company faces potential lawsuits, criminal investigations, and massive damage to their reputation from employing someone capable of such violence. Insurance companies are already questioning their coverage of WWE events, and several major sponsors have expressed concerns about being associated with a company that allowed this assault to occur. But perhaps most disgusting of all is the revelation that Bronson Reed had been planning this attack for weeks according to evidence found on his personal devices. Text messages, internet searches, and social media activity all point to a deliberate campaign of violence against Paul Heyman that culminated in attempted murder. He had been studying Paul's schedule, researching assault techniques, and even practicing his attack. The psychological evaluation ordered by WWE's legal team describes Bronson Reed as having severe antisocial tendencies with a propensity for extreme violence. Mental health experts who reviewed his case believe he poses an ongoing danger to anyone he perceives as an obstacle to his goals. His presence in any wrestling company would put other performers and staff at serious risk. Law enforcement officials who investigated the attack have confirmed they are pursuing felony charges including aggravated assault, attempted murder, and conspiracy. The evidence against Reed is overwhelming, with multiple camera angles capturing every moment of his brutal assault on Paul Heyman. If convicted on all charges, he could face life in prison without the possibility of parole. The impact on Paul Heyman's family has been devastating as they watch one of wrestling's most beloved figures fight for his life because of one man's senseless violence. His children have had to take leave from their jobs to be by his bedside, and his wife has been inconsolable since the attack. The human cost of Bronson Reed's actions extends far beyond just the wrestling world. Industry insiders are calling this the most serious incident in wrestling history, surpassing any previous backstage altercations in both severity and consequences. The fact that a WWE employee attempted to murder a colleague over career grievances has sent shockwaves throughout the entertainment industry. Other promotions are reviewing their own security protocols in response to this incident. The security footage shows Bronson Reed continuing his attack even after Paul Heyman was unconscious and bleeding profusely. He had to be physically dragged away by multiple people while still trying to inflict more damage on his victim. The level of rage and violence displayed is unlike anything ever witnessed in professional wrestling and more resembling a scene from a violent crime. Medical personnel who arrived at the scene describe it as a war zone, with blood everywhere and Paul Heyman's injuries being immediately life-threatening. The paramedics who treated him said they initially thought they were responding to a car accident given the severity of his trauma. One EMT stated it was the worst assault injuries have seen in 20 years of emergency response. The investigation has also revealed that Bronson Reed had been consuming performance-enhancing substances and alcohol before the attack, which may have contributed to his extreme violence. Toxicology reports show dangerous levels of multiple substances in his system that could have affected his judgment and increased his aggression. The combination created a perfect storm for violence. WWE's legal team is working around the clock to distance the company from Bronson Reed's actions while cooperating fully with law enforcement. The potential liability from employing someone who attempted murder could bankrupt even a company as large as WWE. Civil lawsuits from Paul Heyman and his family could reach hundreds of millions of dollars. The wrestling world has rallied around Paul Heyman with an unprecedented outpouring of support from performers, promoters, and fans. A GoFundMe page for his medical expenses has raised over $2 million in just days, showing how beloved he is throughout the industry. The contrast between the love for Paul and the hatred for Reed couldn't be more stark. Social media has exploded with wrestling fans demanding justice for Paul Heyman while expressing disgust at Bronson Reed's actions. The hashtag justice for Paul Heyman is trending worldwide while hashtag Bronson Reed is a monster is being used to share stories of similar workplace violence. The universal condemnation shows how seriously the wrestling community takes this assault. Former WWE executives have criticized the company's hiring practices that allowed someone as unstable as Bronson Reed to be employed. They argue that proper psychological screening could have identified his violent tendencies before he was given access to vulnerable colleagues like Paul Heyman. The failure to protect employees from dangerous individuals is being called a systematic problem. The revelation that multiple people had reported concerns about Bronson Reed's behavior to WWE management before the attack has created a scandal within the company. Internal emails show executives discussing Reed's anger issues and concerning behavior, but taking no meaningful action to address the problems. The negligence in protecting Paul Heyman could result in criminal charges against WWE officials. International wrestling promotions have issued statements banning Bronson Reed from their events and expressing support for Paul Heyman. Major companies in Japan, Mexico, and Europe have made it clear that Reed will never be welcome in their organizations. His violent assault has effectively ended any possibility of a wrestling career anywhere in the world. The medical team treating Paul Heyman has described his recovery as uncertain, with the possibility of permanent brain damage from the repeated blows to his head. Neurological specialists are concerned about cognitive function and the potential for long-term disabilities. Bronson Reed's assault may have permanently altered the life of one of wrestling's most intelligent and articulate figures. Criminal justice experts who reviewed the case describe it as one of the most clear-cut attempted murder cases they've encountered. The premeditation, the level of violence, and the continued assault even after the victim was unconscious all point to intent to kill. Prosecutors are confident they can secure a conviction that will put Reed away for life. The psychological impact on other WWE employees who witnessed the attack has been severe, with many requiring counseling and therapy. Several wrestlers have requested releases from their contracts citing fear for their safety, and backstage personnel are afraid to work events where violence could erupt without warning. The toxic atmosphere created by Reed's actions is affecting the entire company. Insurance investigators examining the incident have described WWE's security protocols as completely inadequate for preventing workplace violence. The company is facing massive premium increases and potential policy cancellations as insurers reassess the risks of covering wrestling events. The financial consequences of Reed's assault continue to mount. The attack on Paul Heyman has also sparked broader conversations about mental health screening in professional wrestling. Industry experts argue that the physical demands and competitive pressure of wrestling can exacerbate underlying psychological problems like those displayed by Bronson Reed. Calls for mandatory psychological evaluations are growing louder. Victim advocacy groups have praised WWE's quick action in firing Bronson Reed while criticizing their failure to prevent the attack in the first place. Organizations dedicated to workplace safety argue that the warning signs were obvious and that proper intervention could have saved Paul Heyman from this trauma. The company's liability continues to grow as more details emerge. The investigation has uncovered evidence that Bronson Reed may have been planning attacks on other WWE personnel beyond just Paul Heyman. Searches of his personal belongings revealed notes and plans targeting several other employees he viewed as obstacles to his success. The assault on Paul may have been just the beginning of a larger campaign of violence. Legal experts predict that the civil litigation resulting from this attack could be among the largest personal injury settlements in entertainment industry history. Paul Heyman's medical expenses alone are expected to reach millions, but the pain and suffering damages could be astronomical. Bronson Reed's violent assault may financially ruin him for life even if he avoids prison. The security footage of the attack has been sealed by court order due to its extremely graphic nature, but descriptions from those who have seen it paint a picture of unimaginable brutality. Law enforcement officials who reviewed the video describe being physically sickened by the level of violence Reed inflicted on a defenseless man. The footage may be too disturbing to ever be shown publicly. As Paul Heyman continues his fight for recovery and Bronson Reed faces the consequences of his actions, the wrestling world grapples with how such a respected industry figure could be so brutally attacked by a colleague. The incident has forever changed how wrestling companies view workplace safety and the screening of potential employees.